So in this video, we're going to build a simple data entry form in Google Sheets. So let me show you what it's going to look like once this is all done. We have this data tab that basically stores the data we're going to enter from this form. And then we should be able to go to this form. And for example, if I want to add a new record, I can simply just type and hit save. And see, we got this message that this is created. Now I can go to data and you'll see Jane is now here and we have a new ID for Jane. Now I can go back and modify any of these records. So if I wanted to update John Doe, I should be able to go to my form and search for John. And now if I want to update, hit save. We should be able to now verify that John's information was updated. See, now it's 45. We can also delete a record. So I can go back. This is John. Now let's say I want to remove Peter. So I can select Peter. That updates this. And then I hit delete. That will delete Peter from this list, as you can see. And we can basically work with this. So now this is going to update. It's going to have the list of our people. You can search this and find this. And if I want the new record, I can click new record. And then I enter some information here. And as I click save, it should add that record for Kyle. So now if I go back to this list, you should be able to see that includes Kyle in there too. All right, so let's get started by just building a form here. So I'm just going to go ahead and rename this worksheet. Let's leave a couple of rows here on top. I'm going to go here and basically just add my fields. I'm going to add something like ID. And right next to it, we'll have the box where the ID is going to go. And then we'll have maybe first for first name, and then we'll do last for last name. I'll add like state. And obviously you can just keep adding as many fields as you need. I'm going to just add one more, some sort of number. And at this point, I'm just going to add some borders to all of these placeholders. So I'll just go here. I'm just going to add sort of light border like this. And I'll just do for this, and I'll keep doing this for all of these other fields. So as you can see, we can't really see it that well, but it's going to be here. I'm probably just going to copy paste this because it's going to be easier. So at this point, I'm going to remove grid lines so we can see those. There they are. I'm going to resize this column, make it smaller like this. Maybe resize this one too. At this point, I'm just going to select this area above and merge all those cells. I'm going to call this data entry form. Let's just center this and change some background color and the font. I'll also just change the font for this entire spreadsheet. Should be good enough. Let's also just resize these things and just make it look a little smaller. So I'm pretty sure you get the idea. So that's pretty much what my form is going to look like. I'm going to need a couple of buttons here. I'm going to go under insert and do this. And basically, we're just going to build a button here. I'm going to call this one new record. And we'll basically just center this thing and add some background color and some font color in this. Let's make this a little darker. Maybe make it bold. Let's just also replace the font. Good enough. Save and close. So these things usually look pixelated for some reason. I'm just going to build another button here that's going to be save, and finally one more that's going to be delete. So the same process all over again. So there we go, we have our buttons. So at this point, I'm going to make another tab. I'm going to call this settings. And on this tab, I'm going to start by adding our next record ID. And we'll start with 1 for now. And then I'm going to go here and do a list of states. And we'll basically just make sure that we have these as an option in this form right here. So I'll just click here, go under data, do data validation, and list from a range. I'm going to click here, check this box. We'll go to our settings tab and simply just select these. I'll actually just do Command Shift down, Control Shift down to select the whole column so that we can add more states, and then reject other input, hit save, Command up to get back here. And basically now we should have a nice drop down here to choose a state. And then for age, I also want to add some validation, and we're just going to make sure that it's a number, and the number should be greater than or equal to 0. We'll just reject other input, hit save, and you can basically add different validations for different fields using your regular data validation here. So now that this is all done, now let's get to actually doing some scripts. And for that, we're going to need a tab where we're going to store our data. And I'll just do those columns, ID, first, last. So let's get to writing some code. So I'm going to go to Tools, Script Editor. We're going to rename this project. We're going to start by building a script to just add a new record here. And the way it's going to work, if we basically hit the save button right here, we're going to basically just grab this information from here and save it here. So for that, we're going to need a couple of things. So first, we need to store references to all of these tabs we have. We got form, settings, data. So I'll start by creating a variable. That will be our spreadsheet. And we'll make 3 variables for our tabs. So this form WS will refer to this form right here. And we're going to basically do the same thing for the other 2. So first, we're going to have to grab all of these fields right here. And I'm going to store the ID in a separate variable and the rest in one variable. So we'll take our form WS and do get range. And the cell for that is this, which is C3. And we'll do get value. And for the others, we'll do an array. and I'll basically just comma separate those cells. And I'm going to comma separate them in the same order I have them here. See, first, last, state, age. So first would be C5. Then we have this, which is F5. So what we'll do, we'll just loop through this list, and using that loop, we'll go get all the values from those cells, and we'll store them to a similar array. Let's just rename this to field. And what we'll do, we'll take our previous array, this field range that has all of these text ranges basically, and we'll map through that. And for each field, we'll do a callback function, which will basically just return the value of that cell. And it's going to be very similar to this. So I'm just going to copy this line, paste it here. The only difference here is that instead of the C3, we'll just pass the actual field. And this line should help us just run through all of these and get those field values in this array. So just to test this, let's do a quick console log. And I'll just console log this. I'm going to save this. Now let's just go and type some things in those cells. And let's go run the script and see if we're able to get these values. So I'm going to go here. This is the function called myFunction. We're going to run that. We'll have to do all this permission stuff. And as you can see, we got Linda, Smith, state, and number. Looks pretty good. In addition to these 4 columns, we're going to need to store the ID for that new person. And to get the ID, we're going to have to get this next record ID number from here, from settings. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll do it before this console log. So that's going to come from the settings worksheet. And again, we'll do get range and just point to that cell, which is A2. And we'll get the value of that cell. And we'll put this in a variable, next ID. So now what I want to do, I want to add it to the beginning of our list, to this fields values list. So I'll just take fields values and do unshift. And that allows us to add a new item to the beginning, which will be that next ID. So if I run the same code so you can see what these field values are after I run this. See, now I got 1 and then the rest, because we get that ID from here and we basically add it to our list. Now, the only thing left to do is to just make sure that we add that information to this data worksheet. To do that, we'll simply just take our data worksheet and we'll do append row, and we'll basically just pass that field's values right here. I'm going to comment that, save it. And then finally, we're going to rename this function. I'm going to call it add record. Actually, let's just call it save record. And we'll basically just apply that to the button that we have. So I'll copy that function name, go to this form, and just take this save button. And I'll simply just do assign script, paste that here, press OK. And now if we hit save, see, it's going to run our script, finished. If I go to my data, now I have Linda here. Now, what I want to happen when I add a record is a couple of things. The first thing, I want to make sure that we set our next record ID to go one up from what it was. So this should have been 2 now. And the second thing I want to happen, I want to place that ID of that person here in this box. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go back to this. So we'll do a couple of things here. I'm going to rename this one to ID cell, and we won't get the value here yet. And then what I'll do after we add this record, we'll take that ID cell and set the value of that cell to be that next ID. And then at this point, I want to go to that settings tab right here to this cell and basically just place the next number in the cell. So for that, I'm going to do a couple of changes here. Instead of doing next ID here, I'm going to call this next ID cell. And then I'm going to change this to not get the value. So now that this get value is gone, I'm going to create that next ID variable here. And that would be that next ID cell dot get value. And that way, this will be fine, this will be fine. And then we just need to now take that next ID cell and set the value to be whatever the value is right now, which is called next ID, plus 1. Save this. So at this point, let's go test this and see what happens. So I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to delete Linda from here. So we got our next record ID still 1. So if I go back and hit save again, see we got the ID here. It says 1, and we should have that record here. And now if I go to settings, our next ID is 2 here. So this means that if we run it next time, it's basically going to now use 2 as the ID of that person. Now next, I want to do something with this new record button. So when we click on this button, I want to basically just clear everything from all of these cells. So let's go here and we're going to create another function. I'm going to call it new record. Now we're going to need to basically clear all these same cells that we've defined here and this same ID cell. And since we're going to need access to all these things all over the place, I'm basically just going to move some of these things to be global variables. So I'll just grab all of these lines, cut them, move them on top here. Now, as I did this, I want to make sure this still works. So I'm going to go back and hit save again. And see, now it went to 2, and now we should have done Linda twice. But it seems to work just fine, so no problem. So now that we have all of these globally, we should be able to just go to this new record and basically just deal with this. So we need to basically run through all of these fields and clear all of them. So we'll take that field range, and we're going to have to map through it. So I'm just going to make my life easier and copy this much. Paste it right here. And what we'll do here, instead of map, we'll use for each. And for each field, we're going to go find the field. And instead of getting the value here, we'll just clear content. And then we also need to clear that ID cell. So that ID cell would be this ID cell. So we'll just say ID cell dot clear content. So pretty straightforward. Save. Now I just have to copy this function name, new record, go back here and assign that to this button. So at this point, if I click new record, that should clear all of these cells. So we can now enter some new name. and hit save. And now we got Peter and we got his ID 3. It's here, and as you can see, next ID went to 4. I don't want Linda twice, so I'm just gonna delete one of these. And it's fine, we'll have unique IDs. The next one is gonna go 4. So now I want to have some sort of search box that I can search and find a record so I can delete or modify it. So for that, I'm gonna go to data. And under data, I'm gonna create a new column. And this column is basically gonna be a formula. And the idea of the formula is gonna be to combine the columns that you need to be searchable. So I'm gonna, for example, in this case, combine first and last names, and I'm also gonna add their IDs. But you could literally add anything you want to search. So if I did this with a regular concatenation, I would have done equals. I would take this and do like an ampersand and add a space, maybe add another ampersand, add the last name. So that would be Linda Smith at this point. I'm not going to drag it down. So after that, I can do another ampersand and maybe add like a dash with a space and then concatenate the ID. Maybe we'll even just say ID colon, something like that, like this. So now I want this formula to automatically just fill down to cover all these other records. But I also want to make sure that I don't confuse my script, that I have more records here below this data. So for that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to first convert this to an array formula. So we'll just do B2 colon B, and then C2 colon C, and then A2 colon A. This should have been C. So now if I do Control Shift Enter or Command Shift Enter, that should drag the formula down, but it should also do this thing. So to avoid this, I'm going to filter this. So I'm going to add filter to this, comma. And basically, I'm going to filter by ID because each record must have an ID. So I'm going to grab these, remove the end reference, and I'm going to say ID is not equal to blank, double quotes, like this. And if I hit enter, see, it's going to clean this up. It's only going to do this for this records. Now, this is okay, but if this was our first record, we would still have a problem because it would probably push this formula down as we add the new record. So we want to move this formula here to this cell instead of having that formula here. So the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to take that formula, copy it. I'll go back to this, what it says search column, and I'm going to make a formula. And in this formula, it's going to be that same formula for now. I'm going to do this. Let's hit enter and delete the formula from here. Now, this is not in the correct spot. But what I'll do, I'll put array brackets around this whole thing, like that. And right now, it should work the same way. But this should allow me to now go and after this, just do double quotes and semicolon and add my column name here. So I'm going to say search column. And if I hit enter, see now our formula is here. However, if we didn't have any records here, this would give us this NA thing. Now I'm going to try to just do if error on this filter function. And then we'll try to run our function and see if it adds the new record in the right spot. Hit enter. So now it's clean, but I'm still concerned that it's going to think there is something in the cell. So let's just test this. So this is our formula. Let's go to our form and click save. So that adds the record. Looks like we're good. See, it adds the record in the right spot, and we got this data auto-populated for us using this formula. So now we should be able to use this column to search and find the record we're after. So for that, we need to create a field for searching. So I'll go back to this. So now that I'm thinking about this, I probably should have done the search here. And this ID shouldn't even be in this section. Maybe we should have moved it on top someplace so it's not that visible. I'm going to do those changes, but then I'm going to also adjust those in our script, unfortunately. So let's just first move this over here. I'm going to add one more line here. And here I'm just going to create our search field. And we'll just copy one of these boxes pretty much. And maybe I'll just do something like this. I'm going to erase Peter out of here. And for this, because these IDs were not going to be manually typing, I'll just do different color. And I'm going to add one more line here and do the same background. So now because of all these changes, I need to update my script. This cell is now C2 for our IDs. So I'm going to go on top here. That's C2. And these cells are now different too. So we got C7, F7, and C9, F9. And the rest of this should be fine. Okay, so now let's first create our search. So what we're going to do first, we're going to add data validation to this cell. So I'm going to go data validation, list from a range. We're going to check this. We're going to go to that data tab, and we're basically going to select starting from here and all the way down. If you're going to be adding a lot of records, you probably want to add more lines to the spreadsheet and then do this. There it is. That's my range. I'm going to hit OK, reject input. And what should happen now, based on what we have in that spreadsheet, this should have those options here. And as you start typing, like, see, Brown, it should basically show that. Or Peter, it should show up. We could also search like ID:4 if you want to find somebody by ID. So now once I'm able to search and click on one of these, at that point, I want to basically autofill all of these fields with that person's information. So that means we need to search and find whatever's here in this box in this column over here. And based on that, we need to grab all of these cells with their information and populate our spreadsheet. So let's do that. So I'm going to go to this and we're going to create a function to search. Now, first we need to get the cell where the search value is, which means this C5 cell. So I'll just copy this, scroll down and paste it here. And we'll take that cell and get the value. Let's correct this. So now once we get the value, we're going to go to this data worksheet and grab all this data here and basically search this column. So to grab the data, we're going to get it from this tab. We already have that stored in this variable, data WS. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to say get range. And the range for this is from A2 through F all the way down. So I'm going to say A2:F. And here we'll do get values to get all that data. And I'll just save this in a variable. So now that data is going to be that whole range here, including all these empty cells. Now we're going to have to search this column to find our matching record. So what we're going to do, we're going to take that data and we're going to filter that data. And we're going to take each row and we're going to compare the information in that row in this column, which is in our array count starts from 0. So it's going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to check if that equals to our search value. Let's actually just do double equals here on this. And if it is, it should basically just keep that record here. So we'll just say records found. Now this is still going to be an array. So in that array, we're going to grab the first record. And we shouldn't have more than one because we hopefully should have a unique ID with their name and last name and all of that. So we're going to take records found. And in this, if we grab the first row, it should give us that record at this point. But I want to only do this if there are actually records found. If nothing was actually found, we don't really want to do anything. So what we'll do, we'll just say if records found dot length equals 0, we'll just return. So we'll stop the function and not continue. Otherwise, we'll continue to this line. Now we need to take this information and basically just put it here. So we're going to first put the ID where it belongs, which should be the first column coming from here. So this ID cell, we're going to grab that. And I think we stored it in a variable on top here. See ID cell. So I'm going to say ID cell dot set value. And we'll take the record. And in that record, we'll grab the first column. So that should get us the right ID. Now that's good for ID, but now we want to also place the other records where they should be. And we're going to use this field range again. And what we'll do, we'll loop through that. And for each field, we know we need to set the value. So we'll take that form worksheet and we'll get range of that field, similar to how I did this here. And we're going to set the value of that field from this records found here. Now, to do that, we need to basically give it a position, like first, second, third. And remember, the first one here, which is 0, is our first column. We really need to start from our second column. So that's really going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the way I'm going to get that, when we do this for each loop, we can actually get 2 arguments here. The field itself and index of that field. An index is going to start from 0 in this. So it's going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. What we really need is actually 1. So what I'm going to do, if I just put this here as a set value and change this to I, that would basically first start from 0, which would be the ID column in our data. We want to start from first name column, so I'm going to do +1 here. Now we're going to find out if this works or not. So let's actually add another record so we can test this. We should probably clear this too. Let's move that on top here again. And then when we do new record, right here, we'll also clear contents from that cell. Save this. If I go back, click new record. Okay, let's add another person. So now we should have 2 people here, as you can see. And if I go here and start searching, we should be able to find Linda. And if I search Peter, we have Peter, Now I want to run that function and see if it populates Peter's information here accurately. So I'm going to go here, that search function. I'm going to go to that function, search, and then run. So let's go back and check what happened. So it seems like it was populated correctly. See, we got 4, Peter Brown, Illinois 44. That was Peter's information. Now, we don't probably want to go run this. I want this to happen as soon as we select this record here. So what I want to do, I want to check if somebody changes anything in this cell, this C5 cell. And if they do, I want to automatically run that search function. So for that, we're going to have to do onEdit. Let's move this to a new file. So I'm going to create a script. I'm going to call this onEdit. And here we're going to create this special function onEdit. And this is going to accept this E argument, which will allow us to get the range of the cell that was modified. And what we'll do, we'll compare if that range is this cell in this tab, then we'll run that search function. So what we'll do, we'll say, this doesn't give us autocomplete. So let me just make something up so we have autocomplete. Okay, so if we have a range, we should be able on that range to get A1 notation, which is basically something like this, A1 through E2 or something like that. So we're going to check if it's that cell, right? So what we'll do, we'll just do this get A1 notation on this range. And we'll simply just say if that equals to this cell, which is C5, then we know we should run our function. As a matter of fact, we'll just say if it's not equal to C5, then let's just return, let's not run anything. Now the thing with this is that C5 can be from this tab, but you could also have C5 from this tab. So I only want this to run when it's coming from this worksheet, which means I need another check. And here what we'll do, we'll just do source. And this will give us a worksheet. And on this, we should have this get sheet name method. So I'll just do this. And this time I'm going to check if that's not form tab. Then stop it, return. In all the other cases, we're going to run that function search that we've created over here. So now, hopefully, if I did this correctly, if we go and make a change, it should automatically just run our function. So let's go test this. So I'm going to go here and change this to Peter. Now we already have Peter, so we're not going to know if this works. So let's try Linda. Doesn't seem to work. So let's go check our executions and see if we get some errors. So I'm going to go under executions. See, we got this onEdit. So since it doesn't show any errors here, that tells me we didn't pass one of these tests. So let's console log a couple of things here so we can figure out what's going on. So I'm going to console log this. And I'm going to console log this. And I'm also going to just console log E. We're probably not going to need this E, so let's get rid of this. Let's just go run this and see what happens. I'm going to go back to executions and take a look. So we got C5 and we got form. That looks pretty good. It actually gives us the values. C5, form. Oh, of course, I didn't spell form right. Stupid mistake. There we go. Save this. I don't need these anymore. So we'll go back now and test this again. Save this, go back. We'll do Linda Smith. And as you can see, that actually did add Linda's information. If we do Peter Brown, that grabs Peter's information and adds it to our form. Very nice. The next thing is going to be to save over our existing record. So the idea is going to be, if I have this populated with somebody's information, and the way I'm going to go about it, if we have an ID here, then I'm going to go find that ID and save over our existing record. If there is no ID, which is what's going to happen when we click new record, if we type something here, there's not going to be any ID. So at this point, when we hit save, we'll just create a new record. So that's the logic I'm going to use on this. So first, let's just grab one of these. See, we got Peter. Let's now go and try to see how we go and search for this number 4, find it in this data, and then basically overwrite our existing information. So we'll go back to this. So we've created save record function, which is when we click on that save button. So all of this code that I did before, that was for creating a new record. What I'll do here, I'll move this to a separate function. So I'm going to go below here and create a function, call it create new record. And basically just grab all of this, cut it, and paste it here. Then we can just call that function here when we want to create the record. So for now, I'm just going to place it here and just comment it so it doesn't do anything. So now in the save record function, we're going to work on overriding our existing record. So the way that's going to happen, we need to go get the ID from here. And that is going to be, see, we have this ID cell. We're going to get the value. And what needs to happen if there is no ID, we're going to create a new record. So I'm going to say if that ID equals blank, then we're going to create that record. So I'm going to move this here. And once we create that record, we can return. We don't need to continue here. So in other cases, if ID exists, we need to go find that ID and figure out which record we need to update. So we're going to have to search for that ID here in this column of IDs. So that's going to come from this data worksheet. And I'm just going to grab the whole column A, which is where IDs are. And in this column, we're going to search using this text finder. And basically that's similar to doing this command F when we search. Only we're going to search in this column only. What we're going to search is that number, basically. So that ID. So I'm going to search for that ID. And we want to do a couple of options here. We want to make sure that we match case, which is not that important because this is really just going to be numbers. And this part is important though to match the entire cell, because if we search 1, we don't want to match 12 because 12 includes 1 in it. So we're going to match entire cell to actually get the right match. And here we should be able to do find next to go find that cell right there. Let's move all of these to separate lines. It's still going to work the same way. And we're going to save this in a variable. Let's tab these in. Now we need to check what this find next does if there's no match. Now the reason we need this cell is because once we find this cell here, let's say this cell, then we need to figure out what's the row number for that cell so we know which row of data to actually modify. So what we'll do cell found get row, and we're going to save that in a variable like that. So that's good. We found the row number, hopefully, based on this. Now, before I move on, I want to do a quick test to see what happens when we search for something that doesn't actually exist. So let's just do console log and just do the cell found. And then I'm just going to go to this and change this ID to 9, which doesn't exist. I'm going to try to see what happens. So I'm going to run this function, save record. So it just returns null. So that's good. Now we can do a quick check here. We'll just say if this is null, we'll just return. So a second ago, you did see how I got an error because we kind of went here and we tried to get the row of a cell that doesn't exist. Right now, hopefully when I run this, see, it's not going to give me any errors because we're going to basically just check here. It's not found and we're going to stop. In other cases, we will actually go and get the row number. So this should have been 4. So I'm going to change it back. So now it's a valid ID. I should be able to go back and rerun this. It should run and not give me errors. And we should be able to also just console log that row to figure out which row the data is supposed to be in. See, row 2. So if I go back and take a look, row 2 got Peter. So now we want to just go and modify this data. Now we're not going to do this one because it's formula, but we're going to need all of this. So it's going to be pretty similar in many ways to how I did that mapping here. So I'm going to copy this line that does that mapping. So basically all this does, it basically goes to this list of cells, basically gets the actual value from the cell. And that's our field values. Now that's going to be an array. Now to that array, in the beginning of that array, we want to add our ID. So the ID this time is not going to be new ID. It's going to be our existing ID that we have right here, this ID. So what we'll do fields values.onShift to add to the beginning of that. And we're going to add that ID to this. So now we should have the data as we need it. So at this point, it's the time to write it to the spreadsheet. So we'll take our data worksheet, we'll get range. We're going to start with the row number where we need to do this modification. The row number is going to be that row variable we found right here. We're going to start our data from the first column, which is the ID column, comma. Then we need number of rows. So we just modify one row at a time. So just one. And then we need number of columns. And that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a formula. So it's just going to be 5. Now we could just do 5 here. We can also just do fields values dot length. So however many things we have in that array. So this way it will be a little more dynamic. And then we'll set values. And those values are basically these values. However, it's going to need this in array of arrays structure like this. And this field values is just an array. So that's the reason I'm going to need an extra square bracket set around this, like this. Let's go and try to run this and see what happens. So I'm going to save this, go back. Let's go and try to modify Peter's last name. So I'm going to go here and enter a different last name, hit save. right now, let's go and check our data. See, Peter Perez. Great. So we're able to actually update the record just fine. And it seems like as we update that record, we should also update this search box, or possibly just clear the search box completely, because I don't know why it should be here. Yeah, I'm just going to clear that search box. So we'll just do that. See, search cell dot clear content. So this way, when we save, it should just clear that cell. This one. So let's just try to update Linda too. Just grab Linda and let's change her last name or state. Hit save. See, that clears here. If we go back here, that was updated. We got our record as it should be. Now, if we go back here and do a new record, because this ID is going to be empty, we should be able to add a new record. And now see, we got the ID. It says 6. And if I go back to this, it says that Olivia is here. So now we have another record, and our search should automatically have that record here. All right, so we got our new record, we got our save. Now it's time to delete a record. So we're going to add another function here after all of these. And that seems to be a reserved keyword because of that highlighting. Let's just change it to something else. Delete record is fine. So now for this, we basically have to go and find this ID again in this column and find which row we need to delete, which is going to be sort of similar to our edit code. So I'm just going to scroll up. See what we did? We got this value of the cell, the ID. So I'm going to copy that. And I'm actually just going to copy this much. Copy all of that. Go all the way down here, paste for our delete record function. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to do this ID. I'm going to get the ID. Then if the ID is blank, we can just return. We're not going to create a record. So we can just simplify this a little bit and do this. And then we can just, again, search for that same ID here in this A column. If we don't find anything, we'll return again. We'll stop the execution. If we do find the cell, we're going to get the row number. So once we get the row number, we simply just need to delete that row. So we're going to do data ws.delete row. And it's simply going to ask us for the position, which is going to be that number of the row we just found, just like that. So I'm going to save it. All I have to do now is just copy this function name, delete record, go back to this, and assign it to this delete button. So I'll click on this, assign script, paste it here, press OK. And now we should be able to hopefully delete a record. Let's try this. So we got, let's find Linda. So that's Linda. Now you can see Linda's data is here like it should be. If I hit delete, let's go to our data and Linda is gone. Now again, we want to probably clear this cell once that happens. As a matter of fact, because we're deleting a record, we probably should clear all of these cells, not just this one. And we already have a function that kind of clears all the cells, this new record. I don't remember if that clears this search value. And if it doesn't, we should probably make sure it does. So let's just try this. I'm going to click new record. It does. So now all I'm going to do, I'm just going to reuse that function in this delete record. See, we got this new record function that clears all the cells. So what we need to do, we're just going to run that after we delete the row, just like that. And that should just clear all the cells once the record is gone. Let's just try this. So if I go here and select Peter, I'm going to hit delete. And it's all clear and Peter is gone. So let's add a person again. So that should now have Peter here. Now, if you wanted to clear the form after you add a person, you can also add that same, see this new record function after you create the actual record. So right here, when we have this create new record function, you could just add that same function below here after this whole thing. I don't actually want to do that, so I'm not going to do it. I thought people might ask, so I'll just mention that. So that created our new record. As you can see, all of this works just fine. The only thing is when I add a record, I would like to get some sort of message to pop up that says, you did add the record. So what I'll do when we create a new record right here, all the way down here, we'll take our spreadsheet app. And here we should have this thing called, what was it called? Well, maybe I have to do get active spreadsheet first. So let's see. This one, toast. That's what we're going to do. Now, I don't know if I have a variable for this. If I do, I'm going to use it. This active spreadsheet, I do. This SS is what it is. So I'm going to go back to that new record and replace this with SS. And here we'll just do new record created. So basically just a message. And here there's the second box where you can add below the first line. ID equals next ID, which will be this ID. That's for creating a new record. I'm going to do similar thing for saving over record. So I'll go back to this save record function, and right below all of this, we'll just add this. And here we'll use that ID variable right there. Good. Let's also do delete record the same way. So I'm going to scroll all the way down, this delete record thing. An ID would be this ID that we have here. That's good. I'm not sure if we need any other messages. Maybe when we search, we need one, or not really sure. Let's just try this. If we do this, or go to Olivia, maybe. I don't think that's necessary. Seems just fine. So let's try all of this to make sure all of this works. So now if I have, see, a couple of people, let's add one more person. I'm going to click new record. And see, now we get this thing. I thought it was going to be the opposite of what I just did. Maybe I have to go back and change this. So basically just change this order of these arguments. And that's it. Well, that was creating a new record. So now we should have John here. Let's save over something. So I'm going to go and find Peter. And then we'll just change Peter's last name or something. Hit save. So we know now we made some changes. And then finally, let's try to find and delete a record. So I'll just go ahead and select Olivia. And then hit delete. And we get this. If we go to our data, Olivia is gone. And we have our search that shows what it should. And that should do it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video.